Poems from my new book, Must of Violence, which is not supposed to be out yet, but it is out.
Is it the world premiere?
This is the world premiere. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this is awesome. Then from our green branch. Then the safety net they held under a branch. Then they hit the branch with a stick, and all of us who weren't holding tight right at that second, or if we forgot, or we lifted a foot to say, or a foot to launch or go, or if dozing, if we'd been looking upward through leaves at a shifting polygon of sky, or if from the beating we lost our sense, if we got dizzy, couldn't hold, if the quaking scared some youngers, or the ground below loomed in seasick waves, then from our green branch we were shaken, dislodged, we fell from our green canopy into something colder. No Blue Morpho. I wanted the Blue Morpho to anoint me with his fragility. I was in his presence, in the tent of butterflies. He did not land on me, though I stood very still for a long time, very still with my arm extended like a thin, resilient branch, buoyant, curious, respectful, a pliant limb, I thought, venturing into the scented air of blossoms and delicate, curling offshoots, a graceful arc of tender branch, but he did not land on me. I tried to look succulent. I imagined myself exuding fragrance, and the lobes of my ears ripened taut with the redolent essence of honeysuckle. But no Blue Morpho came to alight upon my shoulder and unfurl his slender tongue toward the delicate curve, the rosy curve. No Blue Morpho alighted upon me that day beneath the butterfly canopy. The air was mixed, part saturated warmth, fertile humidity, part the cries of a caged canary, part the effervescent sound of evaporating mist from the cascades of a man-made waterfall. I stood very still, hoping to be mistaken for something more beautiful, more luxuriant, luminous, tropical, a fragrant possibility, but no Blue Morpho anointed me with his delicate foot. No Blue Morpho landed momentarily on my outstretched arm to breathe his shimmery wings and launch again. No Blue Morpho drew a curve in air that rested on my shoulder for a solitary point. Instead, in my perfect, concentrated stillness, I heard for the first time the microtones of wing scales drifting softly and invisibly through the heated air, microscopic motes of color-fashioned dust descending through the perfumed air as various butterflies brushed imperceptibly by, the scales accidentally sounding as they fell. The air itself brushed their sound. I overheard that nearly imperceptible symphonic grid, that map of tones within the satiated air, that net of sounds that caught me in its webbing that fell from wingtips, delicacies dropped by the Blue Morpho as he flew on in unerring loops, his joy beamed elsewhere, non-intersecting beacon. The Cheshire Cat. A visitor had abandoned his heavy luggage in the corner of my bedroom, leather suitcases unbuckled and various garments spilling out. Alone in my diaphanous and ruffled nightgown, I sauntered over to examine the strewn pile of clothes and bags, the wreckage when I saw a small, furry, trembling thing, a creature, looking up at me from an incomprehensible knot of shirts. I held out my hand, and it leapt into my cupped palms, a tiny Cheshire Cat. A Cheshire Cat, I thought. I've never seen a real one. If it bites me, that's extremely good luck, I remembered. I looked at the Cheshire Cat. A huge smile had spread all the way across its tiny face. It had beautiful white pointy teeth, perfectly aligned. It looked at me like it loved me most in all the world. It glanced at my bare white forearm exposed beneath a sleeve frill of my gown. It looked up at me again, and its smile spread even wider. Then it turned and executed an enormous chomp into my bare arm. It bit me, I thought, wild with joy and disbelief. This will be the luckiest year of my life. Five tiny doves. It was clear she had carefully considered which jagged rock from the pile of rocks provided for the purpose. Her pitching arm was winding up. I glanced aside and saw a school of silvery fish bank left and right around some monolithic coral growth, around a sunken hull of ship. The silver parted and merged again like balls of mercury. The whole was overgrown with waving plants and strands of ramifying green. She lashed the whipcord for more optimal momentum. I turned my drooping eye and caught a glimpse of a seahorse disappearing into dark. The ridges of its body glistened with mysterious gems. Then another seahorse propelled into view using its extravagant dragon tail. It beckoned me to follow. How can sunlight make it down so deep, I thought. I was concentrating hard. In the periphery, I saw the shovel blade bear down, as if upon another's head, hitting another person. Far up, away, bared teeth with a distant blue sky behind, I myself heard from the bottom of the sea the folding of an ocean wave upon its surface, the muted cry of wheeling seagulls up above, scavenging and rowdy, somewhere far out above the blue expanse, breathing air, occasionally dipping in. But sound in water, the conduit of sound. From my ears positioning far below the choppy surface, from my auditory nerves, I heard inside a saturated seashell's whirl. I heard the flank of a fish creak to change its angle, heard acceleration as it sped away, the pointillistic gleam of fluctuating scales. I heard the effort of a sea slug, a squeaking on the coral. I heard a crab dance by on pointed feet beneath an old crab line where at the floating end I heard fraying of the fibers, loosen, slacken into dark. The lightless bottom where no distilled ray will ever penetrate. Oh, the sound inside the pitch. Nearby on the darkened ocean floor, I heard a living sand dollar drag its mass across the thickening granules. I heard its velvet spines, its follicles unfurl, extend and grasp, its cilia grip individual grains of sand, the rough-cut edges of the grains, and heave its cumbrous body forward, overtaking discarded skeletons and shells along the way. A living sand dollar on its path across the sediment. 5 tiny doves live inside that sand dollar. How much more can I ignore? I listened for the doves. All right, I'm going to read a poem that is a little bit dependent on the page for a lot of various versions. It's written in a grid, so you could read any of the columns down, right? I'm just going to read horizontal version. But the columns down kind of create an almost sense. But they're the unselected entities. The poem is called Selection. For the real animals, the coded animals with their finite sequences, live in a physical space surrounded by all the versions they could have been, the invisible, the almost animals, almost given breath to exist, or breath in time, just as a breath sculpted in time makes a rhythm of real words that fill portions of the invisible grid of stressed and unstressed syllables, all the infinite words that could have been spoken, sounded in space. The grid extends in the air, unfolding back through centuries, back before the first words were hung upon it, ornaments of proof, and stretching onward beyond the languages we recognize, far beyond our own scattered patches, where on the tapestry we sewed words, spoke, surrounded by the selves that could have spoken, those ghost selves that lifted from us as we turned toward, as we turned away and invisibly became all the selves we never became for whatever reason. The worms. The worms were tapping on my forehead. They tapped with the blunt end of their mouths. They were testing the sturdiness of the ground. They were testing the quality of the sediment. 2 worms crawled down my face to line the lower edges of my cheekbones. They drew a string they held between them. A 3rd worm plucked the string. They were testing the pitch and tuning of the gauntness of my face, of the tautness of my skin across its scaffolding. They were warming up the chorus and the soloists. 1 worm shimmied under the string. 1 worm hung its trousers on the string. 1 worm balanced on the string holding a parasol. 1 worm used the string to shoot an arrow up into the sky. Shoot at the sun, shoot at the sun, 1 worm bellowed into its megaphone. 1 worm belted field positions. 1 worm preached a sermon. 1 worm placed a catalog order, artisanal handiworks. 1 worm struck a hard rubber mallet on its metallophone. Some worms listening to the sermon lay writhing on their sides. Some shrieked like terrible children. Some worms listening to the sermon lay draped limp over the dirt pews. A worm listening to the metallophone tried to wedge his way under the instrument for an intimate experience of the music. A worm in the dirt manse embroidered crosses on a worm's stole. I was lying on my back in the fluorescent nurse's room, a curtain drawn around my cot. A worm voice over the high school loudspeaker interrupted the broadcast of my favorite patriotic anthem. A crackle in its voice made me long for dry cereal with profound emptiness and irrational desire. The worm voice said, "Will Oni Buchanan please come to the main office?" Oni Buchanan, come to the main office. Go to the main office, the school nurse said to me. I'm skipping a really redeeming poem in the center of the book. It's huge and long, and there's a guinea pig that's the featured protagonist. And I have to skip to the poem that's a slightly shorter. It's the title poem, which is like the guinea pig poem, Drained of the Guinea Pig. And I'm sorry in advance, but it's the title poem, Must of Violence. Must of violence be administered? Must of violence be enacted upon? Must of violence be had to oneself? Must of violence be endured? Must an unanticipated violence? Must a violence beyond one's control? Must a modicum of violence? Must a dosage or capsuleful of violence? Must an irregularly dispensed occasional vaccination of violence? Must a violence be inflicted upon? Must a violence first be undergone? Unless a machine is built, unless a machine can anticipate, unless a machine's precision, unless the exactitude of a machine can be employed, unless the clean functionality of a machine, unless the useful reliability of a machine, unless a machine's metallic composition, unless a machine's efficiency and preoccupation, unless the spinning cogs of a well-oiled machine, unless the gears and circuitry of a handsome machine, unless a machine whose constant vibrating hum, unless a machine in synchronization, unless a threshing machine be devised, unless a winnowing machine, unless a machine is invented by inventors, unless a machine can first predict, unless a machine can graph and then extrapolate. How many hits does it take? How many hits to disassemble? How many hits to scatter the ingredients in a useful circumference? How many hits to decontextualize? How many hits to see the material on its own terms? How many hits to purify the elements? How many hits to distill the proper essence? How many hits to extract the volatile components? How many hits not to ask what your country can do for you? How many hits to jar the assumptions just enough? How many hits to isolate the isotopes? How many hits to hammer at white heat? How many hits to break the bonds and reforge the remnant molecules? How many hits to loosen like a tooth that offers a newer tooth beneath? How many hits to solve a logic puzzle by ejection button? How many hits to tear the canvas and break the glass? How many hits to lay it all out? How many hits are just enough hits? How many hits are not one too many hits? How many hits are the perfect number of hits? How many hits are the exact duress of hits? How many hits to achieve a boiling point of matter? How many hits to execute with great precision? How many hits to reach a certain brink? What is the certainty of the brink? What is the indisputable defining characteristic of the brink? What is the je ne sais quoi of the brink? What is the elusive, unplaceable perfume worn discreetly at the brink? What is the quality of air surrounding the brink? What is the punctured skin or surface area of the brink? What is the ragged groundwork, the contour of the brink? What is the fluctuating elevation of the brink? What is the mercurial temperature by day and by night of the brink? What is the precise longitude and latitude of the brink? What are the geological constituents of the brink? What is the constitutional makeup of the brink? Is there a flag staked at the brink? Is there my country's flag staked at the brink? Is my family's crest staked at the brink? Is my clan's necessary plaid staked at the brink? Is there a base camp at the brink? Is there a campfire at the brink? Is there room for footwork at the brink? Is there a showcase at the brink? Is there a rationing of provisions at the brink? Are the comestables divided fairly at the brink? Will the pork be salted at the brink? Is the brink made of salt? Is the brink made of ice? Is the brink made of stone? Is the brink made of red clay? Is the brink made of dust? Is the brink made of petrified wood? Is the brink made of flower stems? Is the brink made of animal pelts? Is the brink made of eggshells? Is the brink made of fruit rinds? Is the brink made of rats' nests? Is the brink made of calcite? Is the brink made of teeth? Is the brink made of feathers? Is the brink made of straw? Is the brink made of chaff? Okay, here we have a pig protagonist, but not a guinea pig, but a real pig. A pig, and there are postcards that have Petunia the pig on them, and some lines from this pig. poem on them. It's called The Occupation, and it's spoken by the pig. You see, it really is a lot of work because there is a lot of mud, you see, especially when it rains so much like it has and makes mud upon mud, mud all the way down. And then it really becomes quite the occupation to move all that mud from one side to the other, to push all that mud back and forth, to sort one mud from another mud. I was an industrious pig. In my pen, I pushed a ball of mud from one end to the other. There is so much mud to distribute, and so much works against my perfect placement of mud, against all my efforts. It rains, and my piles of mud are destroyed, are rendered sloppy, festering pools where loathsome mosquitoes breed. At least I can wallow, but to make progress, to make any progress at all, one needs a certain substance to the mud, a certain texture, a structural integrity to the mud, to build on it, to build mud upon mud. I suppose I am all design, all strategy and design, all lofty, ephemeral dreaming, enchantment and charm, unlikeliness. The sun as a kiln could work for me if the sun worked at all. There is no moderation on this earth. Or maybe that's just it. Maybe there is only moderation. I'll just read two more here. Sometimes a body. It's hard to see things differently without the person, without the voice of the person, but more the body that holds the voice, the body that moves from one side of the room to the other. Someone insistent on arguing can see aging on the body, can see weakness. The voice comes from the weakness of the body. It shows a different angle. It reveals alternative possibilities. Compassion comes from watching the gestures of a body. Without the person there, it's hard to reimagine. It's hard to see another way. Sometimes a body there is a necessary intervention. It shows someone obstinate with righteousness, where a voice is coming from. Do you see where I'm coming from? And the vulnerability of the body measures the content of the words of the voice. The body's vulnerability tempers the temper of the words of the voice. It opens up a new, brilliant corridor filled with light. Some may think it's divine light that touches and illuminates another possibility. But it's more than that. It's a light that shines through tears that hang from the golden corridor ceiling on nylon fishing line. The tears on their lines are fastened to the ceiling with transparent thumbtacks. The light shines through all the tears, refracting pendants of unspeakable pain. And this is what makes the shimmering and causes the image to shift. The movement makes compassion in the light. It's like a piece moves in the skull. A fused piece shifts like an effortless opening door. Last poem has rats. Otherworldly thirst. The rats are out drinking at the edges of puddles. Their thirst is unquenchable. They wash their bodies clean on the inside. They restore order to their bodies. Not tonight. I'm not going to get poisoned tonight. Trust the intense desire of the body. Sharpen it. Focus it into an incinerating beam. This hurricane is rather pleasant. I find myself enjoying this hurricane. Is there anything I can do to help? Yes, get yourself in order. In fact, yes, pull yourself together. Know thyself, as somebody once said. Knit thyself together. Tighten the loose strands of ligament. The rats are washing the poison out of their systems with huge gulpings. The poison makes their bodies extremely thirsty, gives their bodies the clue to the only thing that will save them. Otherworldly thirst matched by a standing puddle of water. Water in left-out flower pots. Gutter full of water. Thank you.